as a solo artist?
You gotta get up some early at this lab. Doing like a press tour for a book, this is my second time I did it. Like the hours are kind of crazy because we're kind of used to that in the day, and you're always up earlier than you want. And the weirdest thing for me, not to be sort of, I'm glad when there's nights when we're doing things like this, but sometimes you're just on the TV all day long, and then at the end of the, there's no gig. You know, like you get out, you go through all day, you talk to people, you do all the stuff, and then nighttime you get to go to a gig. You know, that's the big payoff. And sometimes when you do this stuff, like the nights will be fun because we're all here together and it's awesome. But other times you're in the hotel by yourself, like 10 after 8 going. Is this what grown-ups do? And not only like, I mean, it's weird for me to be on the road by myself at all. You know, like, or even like to be in a hotel by myself, like at 9:30 at night. I like, until I did a book tour, I don't think it ever happened to me one time in my entire professional life. And not only, again, like, when I'm by myself, it's not like I'm missing the normal 2 or 3 quiet people that I normally work with and travel with. When we're all carny folk, you know, crazy people, you know, and like, so it's a lot to miss when they're not there. So that's really the biggest difference, is that you don't, you know, you kind of at 11 o'clock at night, I'm conditioned to look around the room or around the hall and laugh wholeheartedly at somebody with their pants half off or something like that, you know, or some foolishness, you know, it's not, you know,
And those stories are in the book if you haven't. You know, as true as this is, what he's saying is true. But the book is about traveling across the country, and now, so you wrote a book about traveling across the country that you're now traveling across the country to promote.
No reward for all this travel. No, I don't mind that. That's the fun part, you know. Like, I like that. You know, I mean, that's like tonight are fun because you get to meet everybody and say, you know, talk about yourself. Was that me? I usually have a guy, sorry, I broke it.
What is nice though for, you know, because the books that we've been highlighting have been from Newfoundland authors, and certainly you're a Newfoundland author, but when you're reading through the book, there is a chapter for almost every province and territory in the country, so it does hold special meaning to everyone across the country.
Yeah, I noticed that this week, sort of talking to people, and just I've only really been to the sort of this side, so far from Toronto to this side, and it's cool to have people, you know, from New Brunswick saying, I'm so glad you said something nice about us. But yeah, so I think people are really enjoying reading. I think people like to hear what other people think of their own backyard anyway. And to hear perhaps what it looked like to me, you know, in 1993 or 4, this is probably a unique, I would say it's kind of a unique lens. That's really not sure, but I'm bumping up against it. I'll move that down a bit. My lens, I've been trying to explain it to people, you know, is a very unique one for most Canadians, not so much for all the rest of us here in God's country kind of thing, but, you know, like I say, in 1993, you know, I had really never been anywhere in Canada. I live on the extreme edge of it. The joke I've been making all week long is, Alan lives so far east, you gotta go west to get to Cape Spear. If you get in a boat in Petty Harbour on a windy enough day, that's true. And so I'm from the edge of it. And of course, the political reality for most of us, again, here in the room, certainly of a certain age, is you know, I'm a first generation Canadian. My mom and dad weren't born in Canada. They were born in a different country, you know. And so my grandparents were born in a different country and were adults, you know, in a different country. And so my parents and my grandparents in the 19, you know, all the people I knew in my family in Petty Harbour in, you know, the 1970s, you know, when I was 1979, when I was 10, or in the early 1980s, I didn't know anything about Canada. We were part of it, but I didn't know anybody from there. Never met anyone. You know, I met people, lots of people from Portugal. There's the White Fleet parked outside Petty Harbour every summer when I was a kid. I didn't know anybody from Winnipeg, Calgary. I didn't, you know, why would I meet one, you know? And so I mean, the political and historical reality was true. And the third weird thing, of course, about the lens that I saw it through was that when I finally did get a chance to see the country that was on my passport, I discovered it out the window of a band van, right? Which is a bit of a crazy way to see it. But, so I think that was the sort of starting point for the book, was like, you know, this is sort of why I thought this would be an interesting thing for people to read. You know, that this is what the country looked like to that guy at that time. And a big deal, I think, for any band, and it was a big deal to see, because we're the first generation, you know, that kind of had a chance to see ourselves nationally, right? I don't think that was even possible for our parents to see. I mean, we had Newfoundlanders playing the Caribou Club and the like, and I'm not sure how much of that they actually got to see, you know, and you know, thank God for Gordon Pinson, you know, like that. Of course, you know, in my young adult life, we had a few people that, you know, were visible in the country, and yeah, and it was. But I think you're right. We occupy a unique place in the country, and people are shocked. You know, even like well-read Canadiana people are shocked when they hear me say I'm a first-generation Canadian. It freaks them right out. You know, and they go, "That's not true." It's like, really? How do you define first-generation Canadian? Well, your parents were born here. No, they weren't. I'm sorry. And, you know, it's like, so, yeah, I think people sort of, like, even in the title of the book, some people have said, are you trying to imply something? I was like, what do you mean that Newfoundland was a different country not that long ago? Because I'm not implying anything. It's like,
but that is, you know, in a lot of our history and a lot of those things people don't know, and I love that throughout the book. There's kind of these gems of wisdom that you've kind of put in about our, you know, historical, our political background, that, you know, or, you know, even just our geography, how it's impossible to grow things here, all those tiny things that as a Newfoundlander you take for granted, and how hard you worked, and how...
Yeah, and you know what, some of those ones I discovered myself when I was, you know, first leaving Newfoundland, and some of them I didn't even really realize till I wrote the book. Like, and I think that's a good thing. Because, for example, if I had really understood in 1993 how almost impossible it is to be a band that tours in North America, stationed in St. John's, Newfoundland, we might have had a good sense and gave it up. And because, like, I freaked myself out even doing the math out, like when I was doing this book, because I wanted to illustrate it for people. But even I was surprised by it. Like the example I give in the book is like, you know, one of them, probably the most important thing to bands is easy access and inexpensive access to other cities other than your own, right? So like you say, like other urban centers. Say, take an urban center of say 30,000 people, right? And so, okay, so take like a 500-kilometer circle. That's drivable in a day for a young band, you know? You know, somebody need up rent a car or something. I said, okay, so take any town anywhere in southern Ontario, just for example, and draw a 500-kilometer circle around that town, or Guelph, Cambridge, whatever, right? How many urban centers of 30,000 people or more do you pass in that circle, right? Dozens, right? And I would say, okay, drop that same circle over St. John's, Newfoundland. How many do you pass? I'll say the trouble, none. I say, here's another one for you. Double it. Right? The band from Guelph now probably have access to 60 or 70 million people in a 10-hour drive. They can go to New York, Boston, like, you know, in 10 hours. Drop the 10-hour circle over St. John's.
Your
answer, Steamville's not 30,000 people. The answer is still none. Right? I tell you what, add another 5 hours. The answer is still none. Add another 5 hours. The answer is still none. It's incredible to think about how hard it is by drive, by boat, by whatever, to get to the next big place. It's, you know, it's practically impossible. Like everyone says, yeah, bands from Northern Ontario, that's the same for them. And I'm like, What? in 15 hours from Timmins, you could be everywhere. You could be in Chicago. Like, 15 hours, you could be anywhere. Like, and it's just, the degree of difficulty for, you know, a touring act out here is even bigger than I thought. So,
Well, you know, and I think
how untraveled and unworldly I was. Up until I started out in the band with Great Big Sea, I know that I'd never stayed in a hotel room by myself before. Not one time, ever. And I don't think I'd ever stayed in a hotel room with any less than like 8 people. So some present company, gentlemen and I'm in. But you know, just a bunch of dudes going on some foolish trip to the Motel Mortier for a ball hockey tournament or something. And that was it, you know? And so when we got to that, our first one of our first Newfoundland tours, do you mind if I read it?
Oh,
is that all right?
I don't mind.
I don't want to break the rules. But when we got to this hotel, you know, and I think people would have, you know, probably find us, you know, a modest hotel to say the least. But it was, I couldn't believe, first of all, that I was about to get to sleep in a hotel room, in a bed by myself. That was incredible. Much less get paid something, $80 or something like that. I stood there leaning on Sean's Festiva with my 2 feet in a pothole about 2 inches deep, rainwater seeping into my sneakers as I surveyed the castle that was Black Hotel. Very thinly manned there. I took a breath and studied the flashing Va Ansi sign. The letters that did work flashed at irregular intervals, which, intention or not, was a pretty cool design feature. And I certainly was not about to let a poorly attended light bulb ruin this for me. All I could see was the luxury of it. The narrow, scratched and dented doors were located conveniently right off the parking lot. We'd be able to load our stuff right in from the cars in the rooms at night. Brilliant. As I walked slowly into our room, I noticed the doors were also nice and thin. So you'd be able to hear everything that was going on in the parking lot across the lounge that night. It was fantastic. The beds were definitely big enough for more than one person, but Sean and I had the place to ourselves. The sheets were almost see-through, not like those thick flannel ones Mom gave us for the house. So I knew I wouldn't be too warm. You know. I went to check out the bathroom and was stopped mid-stride when I noticed 2 sinks. One on the wall in the room itself and the other inside the bathroom with the toilet and tub. Both had mirrors above them and had individually wrapped soaps in the soap holders. 2 sinks, 2 soaps the can. Guess why? Wicked. 2 channels on the TV, too. Sean was already stretched out on the bed. Yeah, deadly. And this toilet has been, right now, I had to get down on my knees and read what was printed on the paper strap holding the lid and the seat together. This toilet has been sanitized for our protection. It's pretty upscale, I thought. All 4 of us started the journey across the country, really, in the band. We did at the perfect time in our lives. But all of us had just graduated from university. Some of us had decent jobs and left them to go do the band. I had a decent job here. Well, would have been here at the Newfoundland Museum. And I loved it. But we all said, shag it, we'll go, give it a go for a few years. And So we kind of, and none of us, I don't think any of us owed any money, and none of us had any kids, and it was just the perfect time to go get in the van and go, I don't know. And of course, that's what we did, because we didn't know anything. And again, for the younger people, I always try to give them a notion of what it would be like. We were in a van driving from here to Victoria and back numerous times. Nobody had a phone in their pocket. You know, nobody didn't know how far it was to go anywhere or come back. I mean, they couldn't check if there was a storm 2 hours ahead. You didn't know. You couldn't, like nothing. Like it was just four fellas looking at each other, like, you know, eating Irving subs. You know? Still like some Irving subs.
And then when you came back to play Salmon Festival, which, you know, was, especially in the 90s, that was a big deal in the province.
Still is, yeah. Still a big deal.
But you know, it's a bit of a spoiler, but you played 2 gigs while there, the main stage with, you know, some of the big bands. But it was the Sunday that I found the most notable.
Well, the story goes that we, you know, and one of the things that you'll read through the book is that very loosely I sort of traced the arc of the band over probably the first decade, you know, from like, I don't know, maybe or the first 6 or 7, 8 years or whatever, from like 1993 to 2000, you know, ish. And I try to, you know, sort of show just generally how the band was rising or getting bigger. Or, of course, I learned that for every step forward, there's 688 steps backwards, and all that natural stuff that comes with it. And the earliest kind of push, I suppose, that we had, or triumph that we had, was to get the gig at the Lower Deck in Halifax, and to sort of very quickly become the default house band there. And it was like a tailor-made gig for us at the time, and it was just all the record companies from around the country saw us there. You know, it was the big launching pad for a whole bunch of the stuff that we ended up doing. And to cap it all off, our last gig there, the summer of 1994, I guess, was we cut the whole week a day short because we landed this amazing gig at the Salmonfest. And we were to be one of the opening acts for the Rankin family. And it was like, that was like Van Halen, man, at the time. It was awesome, right? And this was a big gig. So we bailed on the last day at the deck, and they thankfully let us off with it. And we flew into Gander, I suppose, drove over, did the gig, got there like at 5, our set was like 5:30 or something. And we did really well. But we did, and we felt like the swell of the Celtic sort of rage of the mid-90s was starting, and all the Celtic bands who were us and the Descendants and the Rankins were the big stars of the day, and the rock bands that were playing were not. You know, and so it was just a swell, and we were in the middle of it, and then we had a dressing room like with beer in it, and like, it was awesome. Like, you know, and we like I remember just like finishing our gig and did really well, and just high-fiving each other for an hour, and then like drinking a few cans of beer and going up. And it was like we could stand on the side of the stage and watch the Rankins, and it was just, I couldn't believe it. It was just my own can of beer. Watching the Rankin girls dance on, seeing them over to shuffle. It was pretty wicked. And it was just, we threw ourselves into the evening, you know, and like you would. And in a fit of complete disorganization, I guess, none of us were aware of the fact that we had a gig the next morning. I went back into the dressing room to get another can of beer, I suppose. There was an itinerary there for the next day that said, lunchtime, kids concert featuring Barney. Opening act, great big scene. I'm serious. And I remember being like, focusing my eyes, being fussing like, none of us knew anything about this gig at all. And I remember going out trying to find the boys in the band and say like, you know what this, come back here tomorrow morning or something? And we were like I tried to gently describe it, there was no putting the brakes on the evening at that point. Someone could have said that we were to sing for a papal visit the next morning. Nothing we could do about that. Just gotta let this. So anyway, we threw ourselves into the night as you would, and we finally got together like well after midnight. And so I said, well, we gotta do this gig. Like, we gotta go. So we got picked up at like 8:15 or something like that, and brought back to the site. And all the cool dressing rooms were gone. All the big speakers were gone. It's just like 4 little rickety mic stands waving in the wind out there. And we were to open for Barney. And on the very same stage, on the very same field, where it had gone so well, this morning it did not go so well. We reeked the joint out. And as a parent now, I can only imagine. Drag the youngsters out of bed, go down, you're going to see Barney. It's all right, awesome. And it's rainy and it's cold, and we get there. And the curtain opens, if you will, and Barney don't come out, some dudes. In some state. Let's get it on. You can see moms pulling their children. I got nothing. All my gags are pub gags. I don't know. Anyway, it's described in the book. We have an encounter with a guy in a half a Barney suit on the way back to the dressing room, and he was kind of polite to me, and I wanted to punch him right in the face. And I wondered what would happen to me. What is the penalty for punching a purple dinosaur? Is it different than punching a dude? I don't really know.
Well, I think I was at that same show. It was one of my first gigs.
Yeah.
I was dressed up as a blue Care Bear, and I'm sure I got punched and no one got in trouble. So I think you might have got. It's pretty debaucherous, and I'm wondering, how did you decide what was bad enough to be put in the book and what was too bad to be put in the book?
Legal counsel. Legal counsel had a strong opinion about that. I mean, just like I talked about when I did the first book, Newfoundland is one of those places where the myths are true, right? I always talk about when I worked here, it's like, Newfoundland, everyone talks about, like the mysteries of the sea monsters and the myths of the, like I remember people used to come into the museum and say, I was drawn to Newfoundland because of the myths of the sea legends, and the shanties and the pirates and the mythical sea creatures. I was like, you mean like giant squid? Yeah, that kind of stuff. There's 2 downstairs. We don't even have it on display for some reason. It's downstairs like in a bucket, basically. Like, people were jaw-dropped, but they're like, yeah, there's 2 downstairs. What? It's like I heard the famous story I heard of remind me the name of the family that discovered up in Lansing Meadows and stuff. Is it Ingstad?
Yes.
Them or someone like that. The story goes, spent all this time researching the sagas and the like, and had a long suspicion that there was probably some Viking, encounter somewhere in the northern Atlantic or something. And spent the better part of a decade going around to the various, educational institutions and archives, reading through source material and translating and the whole works. And finally, their travels lead them to the north coast of Newfoundland, like up around Anthony and the lake of Lansing Meadows. So they just go into it, and some old skipper says, "How you doing? Yeah, we're visiting there. How you doing? Oh, there's some. We have this notion. It's kind of an academic thing. We're searching for the trace of the Vikings. Oh yeah, the Viking stuff is just over here." And for me, I guess I come from that culture where, and I tried to explain it when I was doing the first book, talking about the stuff growing up in Petty Harbour, where you crawl down over the bank and try to find a girly magazine, with my buddy Barry, and it's just like, you kind of, not only you don't need to embellish the stories, you gotta kind of dumb them down,
Straight to the picture.
You wouldn't believe it, it's like, and it's just like, the same is true for this stuff. It's just like, for me, it's just like, you know, I cannot tell fully and completely what I wanted to do to Barney when I walked down the stage. But for me, it was just like the stories are just so, they're just so ridiculous in their truest form that you don't need to embellish them, but you literally have to make them simpler.
Like the story of TJ on the plane, another one that I won't get into. However, I do wonder if TJ is now a great big C fan or now a Doyle fan.
He'll be a great big son.
We'll forgo that one, but please pick it up. It's an awesome read. Do they believe this?
Well, just the simple stuff like we were talking about earlier with the whole very recent, national and political history of Newfoundland. I would venture to guess that 75% of Canadians either forgot or have no knowledge of the fact that Newfoundland only really just joined the country. And that's news to almost everybody, And, when perhaps for good reason, and why would they know that? Like, why would you, if you grow up in Moose Jaw, it's like, you got to go to the library and read up on when, PEI joined Canada. Wait. So, yeah, so that part of it, I think, is kind of educational. But for us too, and that's one of the things, like I said, I try to come to is like, we have, sometimes as Newfoundlanders, we have unreasonable expectations of what other people know about us, and sometimes we have very reasonable expectations, but other times, we don't, it's too bad, it's like, we always think about it's the band or whatever that only comes to stars Halifax. It's too bad we're right next door. It's like, why is one not? Connecticut is right next door to New York. Halifax is not right next door to St. John's. Guess what's next door to St. John's? Nothing. We don't have any cities right next to St. John's. Trust me in my heart and soul. I wish the F we did. It would save me so much time. But it's like, we kind of have unreasonable expectations sometimes, but like, you haven't been to Newfoundland, it's so weird. It's like, no, it's not weird. But, they haven't been to Iceland either. We're very similar. We're more like that than we are like, coming to Newfoundland is more like going to Iceland than it is like going to Prince Edward Island.
And for all our hardships, it is, also a blessing because it has remained that we've become a unique destination. We continue to be a unique place. One of my favorite chapters was when you were at home in Petty Harbour with your family, and the scene that you set there, like it just was so, you could just picture it, and it just felt so wholesome and so good, and it was early on in your successes, and you're, praising your siblings for their success, and, I wonder now, like, have things changed when you get together with your family, or is it just things that always was, like same crowd, just celebrating each other?
It's pretty much the same, yeah.
That's how it felt.
Well, yeah, my father would have been here, but he has a gig tonight. So. I'm lucky, man. I say that all the time. I'm a lucky guy, and I think people say when they hear me say that, they think I mean that I'm lucky because the band did well, or my book did well, or my records did well, and that is quite fortunate, but I would say I had a little bit of something to do with that. I had nothing to do with being born where I was born, into the family I was born into, in the town I was born into, and the time I was born into it. And all those are by far the greatest blessings in my life. I talked about a lot of them in the first book about how lucky I consider myself to have been born into Petty Harbour and been a 10-year-old in 1979. It was like the greatest childhood one kid could imagine. It was just, you could do whatever you want, basically. And you could make money and participate in the economy, and it was awesome. It was great. And then I was born into the Doyle family in Petty Harbour. Where like, you hear people talk about, like lessons they learn, or just musical lessons, for example. And you talk about, most people say, well, I learned my lessons the hard way. And I would say, well, I learned mine the easy way. No, I have no memory of learning them. I don't really know it. I can barely remember learning how to play guitar. I was 12 before I realized everybody could play guitar. So I was lucky. That's just luck. And that's just good fortune.
And that comes through in the book that you're talking about, like that, you say, I'm the luckiest person I know, and in my notes I wrote down, oh, well, me too, but it wasn't because I'm in a rock band, obviously I'm not. It's because of the fortune of having that good family, of being from a good place, of having those, tangible traditions and lifestyle. And, that's a wonderful thing to come across here, that, of all the fortunes, the biggest one is those things you do have control of. That was the chapter that I was like, I couldn't read it fast enough because I was so on the protagonist side. I was with you the whole way with how that was handled, despite the odds. I wondered if you could.
It was a bizarre day, and like we talked about earlier, like the trajectory or whatever of the band in the first few years, or the first few years of it was just it was continuous, and like we went to the deck and it did well, and we finally made it to Ontario and played the shoe and the horseshoe and stuff, and we got signed to a label, and it was just like it was moving, and with it I kind of felt like that the place of the province in the country was shifting, and then we had people on TV, we had Rick and the 22 Minutes people were on TV, like even more than the Codco people had been before that, and I finally felt like people were starting to understand our humor and knew a bit more about our history and all that. It was cool. Like, and I didn't think about it a lot at the time. So when we finally got the gig in '97 to be one of the bands on the big Canada Day show on Parliament Hill, it was a big deal. It was a big deal for us because this was going to be a huge gig just on the day, because it would be like 150,000 people there. And more importantly, it was going to be broadcast nationally and internationally, because we had the Queen who was going to be there. She had been here just a few days before for the 500 celebrations and stuff. And so it was a big deal, and it was a big deal for us, and we were stoked about it and excited. And I remember it's getting there, looking at this biggest station, like the airport hangar from it was twice as big as the one at the Salmonfest, which was the biggest one I'd ever seen at that point. And it was just enormous. It was so cool. It was just, and then we rolled up onto the side of the stage, and the guy was just reading through the introductions to the bands, and it was just super cool intro. It sounded like the Doyle commercials. No judge from Halifax. Whatever. It was just so awesome. Some band from Ontario, and it was like this real classy introduction for this lady from Quebec. And then us. It was like, and it was like a Newfie joke about crabs on the beach. And that's how Newfie talks. Here's Great Big Sea. And then they had a dory and sou'westers and oil clothes for us to put on, and they were going to pull us out in the dory. And I started thinking about, and I couldn't really put it in words at the time, but I remember standing there going like, I don't like that. Can we have what he had about the tonight from Newfoundland? Can we have that? That was cooler. Like it sounded more Van Halen to me. And even in the first instances of it there, I didn't know what to do about it. I'm always grateful to Sean and Bob and Daryl, because they were a little bit older than me, and they kind of held my hand through the earliest parts of that debate, and I'm grateful to them for it. And to make a long story short, we had to make up our minds there and then that there was going to be something, if we were wearing, the badge on our coats of Newfoundland, we just couldn't have this. Like we couldn't go on and be like a joke where all the other bands were doing a jokey thing, and maybe we'd do it, but no one else was doing a jokey thing. Why are we doing a jokey thing? So like, why are we funny? Are we getting laughed at? No one else is getting laughed at. I don't like it. And the thing I try to insist upon in the book too is two things. First of all, it's like we're really young to be having this fight, and we were having it with the most powerful people. We weren't having it with a redneck in a bar. We were having this fight with the biggest institutions in the country, the people who are organizing, the nationally broadcast concert on Parliament Hill. Like, there's nothing bigger that we could have been fighting with. And the other thing about it is that I was going to say is that I didn't want to have it at all. I didn't want to have it. We didn't want to have it. I wanted to roll into that gig and for them to love us everybody who was organizing that gig go, man, the next time we do one of these, let's make sure we get those guys, because they're team players, man. Those guys will roll with the punches. They're awesome. And they hated us. They hated us. Because all we did, we just complained from the time we got there. And then, because we didn't want to do that, I said, we're not doing it. And they couldn't believe the insolence of it. You know, like, these guys who were lucky enough to get this gig, and now they're here trying to tell us what props and set and write their own. But somehow we managed to get through it. And that sort of, and of course the funniest part about that is it wasn't going to be, as if the day wasn't wacky enough. After we left the sort of racket with the organizers about the intro and the props, and like, I remember walking down behind the stage. I wanted to go somewhere just to be by myself because I was like freaked out enough. And some gent stops me and asks me if I'm Alan from the band from Newfoundland. And I was like, hey, I'm Alan, how are you? He said, oh, I work with protocol for Her Majesty. I just want to go through some of the lyrics you're singing tomorrow. I was like, what? And he said, well, I think you'll agree that one of them in particular isn't appropriate for a royal company. And I was like, and I really expected like the Just for Laughs guy to jump out of his car. And it would have been funny. But I just said, he must have understood how confused I was. He said, I think you'll agree that this is quite inappropriate. And he turned the clipboard he had, and he pointed towards the lyrics to Auntie Mary. And he said, Auntie Mary has a canary up the leg of her drawers. He said, I'm sure you'll agree that that's not appropriate for a royal compliment. And I remember just sort of standing there like, and I was, like, again, I was so young, and I just remember going like, I swear to God, I think it was like, maybe the Queen doesn't wear drawers. I remember, anyway, the guy said, can you provide an alternative lyric to drawers? No? I really don't think I can. And she said, that's fine, we'll provide one for you. I think you'll find this better. And he took another sheet that said, Auntie Mary got a canary up the leg of her pantyhose. And my first instinct again was, sounds kind of creepier, man. You think she'd like that better? But again, it was sort of the same thing. And what I said to Colin, I said, dude, all due respect, you cannot expect me to get on international television tomorrow after coming out of this car and waving the Newfoundland flag and stand up in front of the St. Pat's dancers and sing Auntie Mary got a canary up the leg of her pantyhose. And then get on a plane, fly back to St. John. I won't get up Duckworth Street. I said, you basically, you'll have to put me in the witness protection. That's what I said to him. If you go down, if you YouTube it, the Britain City, Parliament Hill, or Canada or whatever, you can see the Auntie Mary thing. There's a bunch of dancing in St. Pat's, that's all cool, you know. Anyway, we finally go to sing part of the song, you know, Auntie Mary, you gotta come on, stick it, I'm doing it. It's my big moment. I'm telling you. We're like, up the dubs, and then we went. Anyway, up in Auntie Mary, got a canary up to like for drawers, and me and Daryl look at each other. That's our big Ed Sullivan moment. Drawers. Yeah. That's our big act of civil disobedience. But it was. Yeah. Cemented in our sort of place, I suppose. Something that we never expected and never asked for and never looked for. was that we had sort of become ambassadors for the province, right? And this was, trust me, this was not our idea. And I only thought about this week. Can you imagine if it had been someone's idea? Say up at Confederation Building, going into the meeting, say in 1993 or whatever, saying, hey, I got this idea. I know these guys who will be our emissaries around the country. I can see the premier and go, oh cool, are they from the university or something? No. Are they, international charity workers or something? No. Our ambassadors will be the four fellas who are down at 7 George at the talent night on Sunday with their cut-off jean shorts and Eddie Vedder shirts. They will be our ambassadors across the country. I mean, they would have fired. What a terrible idea. The pub band. That's your guys? Like, what an awful idea. That's how it worked out.
Well, it worked out for the best, I think. But it really doesn't make any sense. But there's so much of that in the language and the colloquial language that it's so common to us, and we hear it, we say it, we understand it.
Yeah.
But then, this is probably a challenging read from someone up in Ontario somewhere.
Well, one of the things like I talked about the Great Wall of China steps. One of the other things that I sort of discovered, I think I mentioned it after I come back from Quebec, for the first time where there's like a language barrier. This is really the first time I became really aware of how difficult it must be for people to come to Newfoundland and have it. This is really the most difficult English-speaking dialect that any Canadian will have to decipher, right? And I started imagining how difficult it must be for people who learn English as a second language here. Poor buggers, came from wherever, learned English here, and then went to the mainland, and it was useless to them.
I'm from Africa, Senegal. I speak
From
French.
Senegal?
French, yeah.
French is your first language?
Yes.
And did you find it? Did you learn most of your English here, or?
No.
I can imagine. I have a friend who's from Holland.
I learned English here.
Yeah. Oh, you did.
Because my first year I come here. If you say me hi, I just know hi.
Sure.
If you say me, how are you? I say I'm good. If you tell me I kill you, I say yes. Because I don't understand what you say. Everything somebody tell me, I say yes. Exactly.
Well, welcome. It's nice to have you for sure. And I always say, just in a very simple sort of, linguistic kind of way. Imagine trying to explain to someone who's learning English as a second language, the sentence, now look what I'm after going. Just like in the study, because one of the things, when you're learning a new language, like you're studying tenses and the like, now look what I'm after going and doing. Honestly, I say all the time, my favorite one is a buddy of mine worked as an employment counselor in Clarendon. She had the famous, guy comes in looking for a job and says, I don't suppose you don't know no one don't want nothing done, do you? And there's others, I tell the famous story of my sister Kim. I could have told a million, but there's another one that's in there. I tell the story of my sister Kim, who worked in healthcare, still does, her whole sort of adult life. And she was working at the, I think it's St. Clair's at the time, and she had a student, assistant joiner, we'll say, from St. Thomas, Ontario. And, she was learning the trade or whatever. And, got placed in Newfoundland, and he comes on in and doing good on the first day. And towards the end of the day, she comes into Kim's office and says, I think we might need to get a psychiatric consult. Kim's like, what? It's like, there's an older guy outside and he's looking for his limbs or something. I don't know. He can't find body parts or something. I don't know. Kim's like, one second. So Kim goes out, this old skipper, on the southern shore. And he said, oh, Mr. Chafe or whatever, Mr. Chafe, what's the problem? And he says, my love, lately here I finds my arm when it gets wet. And she turns to the girl and goes, he has arthritis in his elbow. All these years, I never found my arm one time, but now here lately when it gets wet. You can imagine trying to explain that. The thing that struck me about that whole, like sort of, the new offshore, or the new sailors, schedule, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. It's like, on a boat, you just go on a plane, Fort Mac, and the thing that, like, I sit on airplanes a lot, and I was just very early kind of struck, coming from this kind of foreign place, far away place in Alberta, that we'd sit on the airplane, and the faces that got on the airplane was like, I knew every one of the faces. You know what I mean? Like you knew, like, every face I saw, I kind of recognized. It was like that, and they didn't belong here. They belonged somewhere else. Like there were the faces that I saw on the wharf at Petty Harbour, and there was like the faces of guys in the woods, and there were like the faces of Newfoundland workers and men, and it was just, it always struck me as such a fish out of water thing. I just had so much respect for them, and these are the, they're the new builders of the country, right? And they used to do it on the water, and now they do it somewhere else. But and it was just a thing that I remember being moved by it from the first time when I saw it. It was like, this is like one of the coolest fish out of water paintings to my eye, right? Like, and I had a deep respect for what they do for a living.
And I think that dignity shows through with all of the characters, local characters, your family, friends, the band. There's no one that's being smited, despite there being a lot of humor and a lot of.
Except Barney.
But he deserved it.
Well, he's past his prime. That show's been canceled for decades. Before we open it up, we're going to go back to the floor shortly for a few questions. Afterwards, I do want to leave some time for us to mingle.
I've thought about this exact thing for a long time, and I'm not sure you know the answers yet, but it's an excellent question about, if you're responsible for postcarding a place, is that indeed a good thing to do? You know what I mean? It's like, imagine if it actually was like it is in the tourism commercials all the time. Oh my God, but I'll be tan, and I'll have clothes that smell like clotheslines. So it is, like when you end up in that role, sort of introducing people to a place, it is something that I think you should be aware of in general, but I think especially like in a book or in a song or in something that's kind of, that has the potential to last way longer than you, that you need to be especially careful. In one sense, the other thing that sort of guards against that, I always find that it's not true, it's no good. It's obviously like, if it's not true, it's just no good. Like, it's like, yeah, if you have this song that paints this picture that's not true, the song's no good then. What song is any good that's not true? What joke is funny that's not true? You know what I mean? And so, as a songwriter, I don't mind romanticizing things that I find romantic. But that's true, because I find it romantic. When I sing Jim Payne's Wave Over Wave song, I think that's beautiful. I can't help it. It's romantic for me. So, whereas, I know that every time the skipper went out through Petty Harbour, I was a kid, he wasn't going wave over wave. What did you? Oh yes, bud. We're all singing to each other around the But the thing that Chris, asked once upon a time, and I think it's a really good question, is like, does the Newfoundland that we romanticize, especially people who live away and pine for it, does it exist, and did it ever exist at all? And I don't know the answer to that question, but that's why I always talk about the stuff I know to be true, because there's tons. I don't need to make it up. It's like, you don't need